Let's have a little chat about anxiety.
It may not feel pleasant, but we wouldn't be here today if it wasn't for anxiety. We wouldn't survive. So it's almost like trying to befriend the fact that we're feeling this anxiety. It's doing its job. Our brain's doing its job. It's sensing us of the danger that might be present. We're getting that sense of fear, and that's where the fight-flight kind of kicks in. And I like to use the we wouldn't be here. So the analogy of a smoke alarm. So the smoke alarm's one job is to go off should it detect any kind of smoke in your house. But it can't differentiate between your house burning down or some burnt toast. It's still going to go off and do its job. And that's exactly the same as what the amygdala in our brain does. It senses that fear, that danger, your life's in danger. So its job is to send physical symptoms. Rather than looking at that as our enemy, it's almost trying to befriend that part because it's doing what it's meant to be doing.
Is there a point that where you're talking about, Duncan, that it's so far down the line, maybe you've been experiencing these symptoms for quite some time, not saying you specifically, but in that example, the person's been experiencing these symptoms, they're almost worn down off it? And is there a point almost where at the start that you can, like what you're saying, you can get a hold of it and use it in a positive way? If I'm making sense there?
Well, I think it's kind of differentiating between anxiety disorder and anxiety. So we all experience anxiety. An anxiety disorder is something very different, where it literally is taking over your whole. You can't eat, you can't sleep, you can't connect with people because you're so highly anxious, highly strung all the time. One of the most common questions I'll ask somebody is, do you know how to breathe? And you get some strange looks when you ask somebody that question. Coming back to your breath is possibly the best anchor to, restart and start to think more rational, logical, because when that fight or flight kicks in, the rational, logical thinking part of your brain does one, it disappears. So if somebody, it's like if you've had a car accident and somebody starts telling you step by step, you need to do this, you need to do that, that's not going to go in. The part of your brain's offline. But to kind of try and get it back online is certainly using some things like breathing exercises. But box breathing, I love that one. So why don't we all try it now? So first thing will be to check in with yourself, like a temperature check if you like, and just try and recognize, like I like to scale, so 0 to 10, 10 being, really, really anxious, 0, neutral, or you're really relaxed, scale where you are now. And then we're going to start by breathing in through the nose. We're going to try and breathe in for roughly about 4 seconds if we can. We're going to hold it, like you said, for a good 4 seconds or longer, if you can manage it. Breathing out through the mouth, but we're almost controlling the breathing as we're breathing out. Now you will get to a point where you're going to think you've exhaled, but there will be a little bit left in the diaphragm. So for me, that's the important part, to really let it out. Okay, sometimes this is known as kind of belly breathing as well. So in through the nose for 4. Just hold. And then controlled. And then just kind of notice. You're noticing how you were feeling before to how you're feeling now. And sometimes there can be an instant reduction. So we're going to try that again. In through the nose. Just hold. And let it out nice and slowly. Let your belly go right out. So it's very hard now for me to, if anything was stressing me or make me feel anxious before, or I had negative thoughts going through my mind or anything, it's really, really hard to stay connected to that whilst you're doing an exercise like this. And that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to break, I don't know what you would call it, but like I was saying before, the logical, rational part of your brain goes offline. That's a way of getting it back on. So just to stop, take a breath, gain some, new perspective, look at your situation from the outside in, observe what's going on, and start again.
Not talking, as Paul mentioned before, about anxiety disorder, but would you say anxiety is often used more loosely than depression? The phrase of, it gives me a bit of anxiety, or yeah, I'm feeling a little bit anxious about this coming up. It's almost, what's the phrase you always use, normalized. It's almost more normalized, isn't it, in culture? And whereas, is it less likely that someone would say, although we might hear the phrase, it's made me feel a bit depressed, or it's less common that someone would use that phrase loosely? Would you agree? Yeah.
I think definitely when you're talking about another person, like an observation you made about somebody else, to say they look a little bit anxious, opposed to they look depressed.
Yeah, yeah.
I think you'd be more likely to keep that maybe to yourself. I don't know. That's my observation.
Right. Yeah, so don't jump to conclusions, don't diagnose, and almost try and prevent yourself in your head doing that.
You know, part of my role is not to diagnose, although I could be 99.9% certain that a particular person is presenting with a particular thing, and we will use strategies or, you know, whatever we need to use to help that person. But that's where I would be directing or signposting that person to the GP. You know, alongside what we are doing. Keep coming back to, I'm not the expert. I'm not the expert.
Which hopefully takes a bit of pressure off you as well, thinking
That's the idea.
like, yeah, what if I say the wrong thing or anything? Ultimately, if you're coming from that place of, I'm trying to help this person, as you said, Rachel, I'm trying to help, and that's all I'm trying to do. You're coming from a good place, and yeah, we'll cover it a little bit more in a second anyway, but not instructing someone to do X, Y, and Z, which we'll look at in a communication piece that we'll be getting to.
Really on the back of what we've just said, I don't know if anybody's familiar with this. This is very much a CBT model. So this is your basic thoughts, feelings, behaviours model. If I was to use an example just to bring this to life a little bit, if you can imagine, you know, a thought popped into your head that your friends don't necessarily like you anymore. Okay, you've created this thought in your head. Now, there's no logical or rational reason, but you've created this thought that your friends no longer like you. That's caused you to feel a little bit sad inside, and it just so happens that you've got a night out planned on Friday. So because of the original thought, what we do is we tend to change the behaviour, and we don't go out. And the fact that we didn't go out on that Friday to meet with friends almost reinforces the original thought, and that's where we obviously can get caught in that vicious circle. So I think the one thing that we can't stop, and I would never recommend anybody try to, is stop with thoughts. It's an absolute normal, you know, we all have thoughts. The way I like to look at it is to try and separate me and separate my thoughts. Just because I'm thinking something doesn't mean it's going to be true. And I think even just to know that can be the start of getting out of this vicious circle. So every time we have a thought, the likelihood is it's going to generate some kind of feeling in my body, which is absolutely normal. This is almost the crossroads. Because I've thought what I've thought and I feel the way I feel, does that mean I'm going to have to change what I was going to do? That's the crossroads. Not an easy thing to get out of, but it absolutely is possible. If we go to the extent of disorders or depression, you know, clinical depression, this is usually what we get caught up in. And a lot of the time we do stop, you know, the things that usually, you know, allow us to have fun, make us feel happy. We slowly start to cut them out of life. So all of our behaviours do change as a result. And one of the most common, you know, bits of advice or something you would encourage somebody to do in this situation who's feeling this way is to work on behavioural activation. You know, if that's something that you do like to do, go out and try and do it. You may not do it to the extent that you were doing it before, but I often say to people, if you've said that you like to go to the gym, you say you like to go for a run, the first part of that process, if it's something that you've stopped doing for a long time, maybe just getting ready and driving to the gym or walking to the gym and turning back. It's a step in the right direction. But yeah, it certainly is a process, but it absolutely is possible to get out of this loop.
It's understanding that reasonably practicable, isn't it? Have I got that space to push someone to gain the anxiety? Like I think it was you mentioned, Emma, your threshold almost, will this push my threshold up? Their tolerance of stress and anxiety, not anxiety disorder, but can I get some learning from that? And when we look at a tool in a little second as well as what growth can I get from that? And again, how often have we come out of a really stressful period at work, loads of deadlines, massive project, and when that was so hectic, but actually what have I learned from that? And that's that space of anxiety being beneficial, stress being beneficial, isn't it? And it's getting into that coaching and the relationship role with your employees or anyone that works for you to be able to coach them and push them and say, I think you could, would you be interested in? Never saying, you go do that, obviously.
What is depression? This image, it basically represents someone with depression, how they feel absolutely disconnected to everybody in the outside world. They can't be part of what's going on in the outside world. We've got a video on this actually, but this comes from, I don't know if you've seen the video, I had a black dog, and it's all about someone who's dealing with depression. It's an animated video, but it's really powerful at the same time.
I had a black dog. His name was Depression. Whenever the black dog made an appearance, I felt empty and life just seemed to slow down. He could surprise me with a visit for no reason or occasion. The black dog made me look and feel older than my years. When the rest of the world seemed to be enjoying life, I could only see it through the black dog. Activities that usually brought me pleasure suddenly ceased to. He liked to ruin my appetite. He chewed up my memory and my ability to concentrate. Doing anything or going anywhere with the black dog required superhuman strength. At social occasions, he'd sniff out what confidence I had and chase it away. My biggest fear was being found out. I worried that people would judge me. Because of the shame and stigma of the black dog, I was constantly worried that I'd be found out. So I invested vast amounts of energy into covering him up. Keeping up an emotional lie is exhausting. Black dog could make me think and say negative things. He could make me irritable and difficult to be around. He would take my love and bury my intimacy. He loved nothing more than to wake me up with highly repetitive and negative thinking. He also liked to remind me how exhausted I was going to be the next day. Having a black dog in your life isn't so much about feeling a bit down, sad or blue. At its worst, it's about being devoid of feeling altogether. As I got older, the black dog got bigger and he started hanging around all the time. I'd chase him off with whatever I thought might send him running. But more often than not, he'd come out on top. Going down became easier than getting up again. So I became rather good at self-medication, which never really helped. Eventually, I felt totally isolated from everything and everyone. The black dog had finally succeeded in hijacking my life. When you lose all joy in life, you can begin to question what the point of it is. Thankfully, this was the time that I sought professional help. This was my first step towards recovery and a major turning point in my life. I learned that it doesn't matter who you are, the black dog affects millions and millions of people. It is an equal opportunity mongrel. I also learned that there was no silver bullet or magic pill. Medication can help some, and others might need a different approach altogether. I also learned that being emotionally genuine and authentic to those who are close to you can be an absolute game changer. Most importantly, I learnt not to be afraid of the black dog, and I taught him a few new tricks of my own. The more tired and stressed you are, the louder he barks. So it's important to learn how to quiet your mind. It's been clinically proven that regular exercise can be as effective for treating mild to moderate depression as antidepressants. So go for a walk or a run and leave the mutt behind. Keep a mood journal. Getting your thoughts on paper can be cathartic and often insightful. Also keep track of the things that you have to be grateful for. The most important thing to remember is that no matter how bad it gets, if you take the right steps, talk to the right people, black dog days can and will pass. I wouldn't say that I'm grateful for the black dog, but he's been an incredible teacher. He forced me to re-evaluate and simplify my life. I learnt that rather than running away from my problems, it's better to embrace them. The black dog may always be part of my life, but he'll never be the beast that he was. We have an understanding. I've learned through knowledge, patience, discipline and humour, the worst black dog can be made to heal. If you're in difficulty, never be afraid to ask for help. There is absolutely no shame in doing so. The only shame is missing out on life.
I can definitely relate to that. I suffered with depression. About 30 I was diagnosed with depression. Absolutely a complete curveball. Totally took me by surprise. It felt like one day I was fine and then the next I just wasn't. But obviously just continuously trying to brush it under the carpet. It'll be okay, tomorrow's a new day. Remembering all of them, you know, the things that you were taught from your childhood, that you just get on with it, suck it up, be strong. So obviously in your mind, what you create as a narrative, as if I do talk out about this does mean that I'm weak. That's what it'll correlate to. And it absolutely is not the case. There's no way that I would be doing what I'm doing now hadn't it been for that period in my life. It wouldn't have happened. Personally for me, I was so keen on finding tools to help myself. Did end up taking medication. Medication absolutely did help. Personally for me, thinking back, you know, my therapist decided that mindfulness would be a really good tool. Embarked on an 8-week mindfulness course, completely changed my life. Still use mindfulness to this day, you know, meditation on the morning, etc. But yeah, it's I suppose when you're in it, just like that image of the glass tube, you really don't think you can get out. But unless you speak up, there's a good chance that you're going to stay within that glass tube. And fortunately for me, I did choose to get that, and I got, you know, support from my GP. At the time, support from my friends who weren't that understandable. Thinking back, I think one of them actually said, "That's the last thing I was expecting you to say. I thought you were strong." And that really, I'll never ever forget that comment. But in general, you know, absolutely the right thing to do. So, should you know anybody that is in a similar situation, I would be massively trying to encourage them to talk and speak up and seek help. Similar to what we were saying with anxiety, if you knew somebody, you probably might be more prone to identify if they were anxious, but then I think we'll come to the conclusion you could still notice, even if you didn't know the person. What about somebody with depression? How would you tell? Because this iceberg analogy, what I like to use with my clients, we're all adults at the end of the day, and it's fine if you feel like you don't want to go out. You might have arranged a night out with your friends, your family, and then you think, actually, I'm not that bothered, don't want to go. We're all entitled to do that. Having a bit of quiet time and withdrawing, it's only recently that I've given myself the permission, if you like, to withdraw. We've kind of seen that as quite a negative thing. So over the last few years, I've completely turned that around. For me personally, to withdraw gives me that headspace to kind of recalibrate and check in and start again. If somebody who knows me, or somebody who doesn't for that matter, they may come to the conclusion in their mind that there's something wrong. So what's going on above the surface might mean that it's something completely different going on underneath the surface, but it also might not. So if somebody was displaying these kind of behaviours, do you think they could be depressed? Is there a chance? Because in one respect, I've just said that's totally normal to be acting that way. But could it mean something else? If we get a suspicion that something is, you know, there's something a bit more sinister, if you like, going on underneath the surface, really there's only one thing we can do, which is to ask. But again, you know, what we're going to go into a little bit more further on in the workshop, that's not the easiest thing to do because of what may come next. and we're not experts. It could end up being that there is an episode of depression. They could have an array of suicidal thoughts going on, potential plans in their head, you know, drinking way more than they usually drink. But all of that stuff, if somebody did disclose any of that to you, so you did ask, and they did disclose this information, what then?
Okay, so moving into mental health conditions now, and more specifically looking at anxiety and depression. So really what we're looking about in this section is, let's have a little chat about anxiety. So what is anxiety to anyone in the room? What does it look like? How would you know if someone has anxiety?
I call it the fear.
The fear?
Don't feel anxious. It's feels a bit like, have you seen Stranger Things?
Yeah.
It gets that tingle.
Yeah, really nice. I like that.
Yeah, it's just it's a feeling of fear.
It's an unexplainable